You're listening to episode 237 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practices from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Molly Hahn returns to speak with us about the growth of Buddha Doodles, her upcoming book, Buddha Doodles, Imagine the Possibilities, and Thriving After Trauma. Hi everyone. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to remind the listeners that we've started a new podcast which may also interest you. It's called Present Moment, Mindfulness Practice and Science, and appears every other week, alternating with The Secular Buddhist. You'll find many of the same guests you've enjoyed and learned from here, as well as new researchers, teachers, and practitioners. You'll find Present Moment in the Science and Medicine section of iTunes in Natural Sciences, or just do an iTunes store search for mindfulness and look in the results in the podcast section. You can also visit the website, presentmomentmindfulness.com. Thanks for checking it out, and if you like what you hear, please feel free to share it with others. Trauma in youth seems to be a growing problem in terms of numbers of cases at a younger age and with increasingly complex and severe symptoms. The outlook for those suffering from abuse, particularly in the formative years of childhood, may seem grave. What would it be like, though, if you could intentionally take ownership of healing and perhaps become a creative and directive force in your own life? Molly Hahn, also known as Molecules, began her daily meditation sketch practice in 2011 after a series of traumatic life events. Her Buddha comics, light in heart but deep in intent, greatly helped her in her own healing process. To share and pay forward this joy, she began posting Buddha Doodles online and was delighted when they quickly found an audience. The Buddha Doodles community is now over 200,000 strong and growing at buddhadoodles.com. Special thanks to Laura Iverson for her coordination of this interview. Thanks, Laura. So sit back, relax, and have a nice doodle drop tea. Returning guest today is our friend Molly Hahn. Molly, thank you so much for coming back. I've missed talking with you.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Ted. Thank you.
So can you believe it's been 3 years since we've last spoken on the podcast?
It's hard to believe.
We're recording this in October 2015, and we were last together online in October of 2012. Buddha Doodles Volume 2 had just come out. Catch us up. Quite a lot has happened since that interview with Buddha Doodles. How has it grown?
Since we've last talked, I have opened an online gift shop per the request of my audience.
Including me.
Including you, wanting get swag. The swag directly supports the comic. The gift shop has been very successful, and I'm very grateful for that. And also, since the self-published Volume 2, I went on to self-publish some gratitude journals, which were also really well received and recently signed a book deal. So there's a very big arc there. The new business, the new book deal, the community itself has grown exponentially, and I have a team now that supports me in nurturing the community, which is number one for Buddha Doodles, is investing in our community and acknowledging our fans and making sure everyone feels heard. So yeah, there's a lot of juiciness there to get into.
There is. Let's dive into the gratitude journals a little bit, and I'll mention to the listeners that all the gratitude journals and the Buddha Doodles books, and in fact the upcoming book, Imagine the Possibilities, are linked on the episode page for this episode. Let's talk about the gratitude journals, because they started out, and it's been interesting watching your style of imagery become, I feel, more complete. That instead of being just pictures on a page, you start to incorporate more of the whole space. And I saw this in particular as you went from the first gratitude journal to the second, as you went into that. Tell us about the journals themselves. What are they, and what was your inspiration to start doing them?
Such a good question. Well, it takes me back to, I think, about 2.5 years ago, I self-published the first gratitude journal, and it was inspired by my own personal gratitude practice and how I saw shifts happen in my life that were positive doing a daily gratitude practice. And so naturally, I wanted to share the inspiration with others through Buddha Doodles. And I also remember when I was in a relationship with my former partner, we would say the few things we were grateful for every night. It was something that really kept us going during a difficult time in our lives, both in our relationship, in our personal lives. We were struggling with some losses in our family. And so this nightly gratitude practice was a way for us to wrap up the day on a positive note, no matter what, even though we were having a hard time. So that was the reality of where it came from. And so I wanted to share that in this pictorial form. And the first journal did really well. I had no idea how it was going to be received. I got photos from fans, in South Africa or, somewhere else in the States, and people holding their gratitude journals, tagging me on Instagram or Facebook. And it just warmed my heart that, wanted to do another one. And it's a very positive feedback loop with my audience. I feel like I need to stay in sync with my audience. And it's really important for me to listen and be open and receive inspiration from my fans. And so I went on to make a second journal, and like you said, it was more immersive, and I was playing with environments and feelings, more emotional landscapes, full spreads, full bleeds, really stretching myself as an artist and trying new things, which is important.
Yeah, and it was beautiful too. And one of the things that you mentioned, Molly, was talking with the fans, with the people who are supporting this and who've asked for you to grow as Buddha Doodles has. And something I want to talk about for a little bit is that engagement that you have with them, because you do videos and you have these opportunities for people to order the journals earlier. And of course, it's a normal author kind of thing to do, but it's a little more creative than that. I'd like you to talk about that some, because these are the kinds of notes that normally I dread when I get you can pre-order my book. I'm like, oh gosh, that's great. But not with these. They're more fun. So tell about that, because you've made them an artistic experience.
Yeah, I think I'm an entertainer at heart. It really means a lot for me to share the love and the inspiration behind the project as I'm asking for people to support Buddha Doodles through, pre-order purchase. So I make sure to always add a little extra something, whether it's an original hand-drawn doodle or a card or a personal note. Sometimes I'll make funny dance videos. I'm a dancer also. I dance hip hop and funk and all kinds of fun stuff. And so I love to share other parts of myself, my light, and my true love for expression. And then most recently with the pre-order launch for the book, the new book that's actually coming out with Andrews McMeel Universal. I love surprises. And so for a couple months, had been working closely with an old friend of mine from college. We used to make films together, animated films. So we know each other for over 10 years. And we collaborated on the book trailer. And I pulled in a friend that I met in LA 8 years ago. He took a song I wrote and made it even more awesome. And we created this like, bam, like I love like the idea of ripples in the universe, you know, just love ripples. And so it was this huge surprise and people loved it. It went viral very quickly, which was really sweet to see that my whole team was recognized on that level, because it wasn't just me. It was a team of people, 3 people that created this magic, and it inspired us to keep going. So that's whenever I ask, at least I try to, as much as possible, add a little extra something. There are some days when maybe a newsletter isn't as embellished or as creative. That sometimes is just the reality of running a business, but I really try to make an effort.
Yeah, and least creative for you is like a 6th dimension for other folks. So even those are really something to enjoy, to sit down and feast on. So I appreciate you doing that. So let's talk a little bit about, you've experienced some changes in your life too over the past few years, and maybe you can refresh the listeners who have heard your previous episode, 140, or maybe those who don't know you yet, and talk a little bit about how trauma in your life has moved you.
This is such a good question. I love this. And I was reflecting on this today as I went for a hike and took a moment to grieve some things that I'm integrating into my life still. And so for those of you who are new to my world and those who are checking in again 3 years later, a little backstory on me is that I grew up in a very abusive home. Both of my parents are mentally ill, and domestic violence and sexual abuse and psychological abuse and, you know, witnessing suicide attempts was just the norm. And I was lucky to make it out. I worked very hard to make it out of this home that I grew up in. And I started therapy age 20, and my art is directly related to my healing. In conjunction with therapy, I also was very proactive in writing to myself, to my younger self, to my little girl for many years. And, you know, I was diagnosed with PTSD in my 20s, was riddled with fear, and I was like a walking time bomb. You know, had anxiety attacks, panic attacks, agoraphobia, paranoia, intrusive thoughts, autonomic nervous system responses that were totally out of my control, of course, autonomic. And life was hard for a long time, but I also worked really hard at healing, and my art was always a part of that, like I said. And my kids' books, all the kids' books that I've self-published before, Buddha Doodles even, are all a part of that journey in some way. And I feel like life has really just begun since when we first talked about 3 years ago. I was just starting to enjoy life PTSD free. And even to this day, it's hard for me to even, just now, just looking back, I'm like, it feels like a different person that I still have so much compassion and love for that person. I'm so much more of a stronger, resilient person because of what I went through. And I also feel like it very much changed in my cells and like my being and all the work I've done, you know. I'm like, yes, it finally paid off.
Well, and it did. The feeling tone, Molly, that you had then when our dear departed friend Jan Ford very kindly introduced us, there was still this very bright and vibrant person that you are now, even more so. It's that the light has turned up a bit since that time, and a tone that's in the background doesn't seem to be quite as predominant there. And there has been that change even just in the past 3 years. And hearing your story, as I've heard it before, and we've talked about this, often when people have as severe growing up as you did with the abuses that you suffered through, that leaves more of a mark. And you were marked. And you, as you said, you've intentionally gone towards healing that. And that's made a change, that this did not become deep, ugly, very omnipresent scarring. You've cleaned that tissue up and done some healing on it, and it shows. So what would you like to share with a listener who may also have been touched by trauma?
You're worth fighting for. Don't give up. Healing is possible, and it's worth every step, even if it feels like you are taking a few steps back. It's really worth investing in your healing, and know that you are not alone at all. And you cannot, like the gem, like the jewel, that's been my visual through all this. While it might get a little dirty and a little mucked up, it can't ever really get scratched. And that is there, and your essence is still there. And even though it can feel really hard going through all the fires, to keep going, not give up.
Yeah, when you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep going.
Yes. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I used to not believe that when my therapist would say that. I was like, I want to get to the finish line now, like two sessions in, right? I'm like, 21, come on. Yeah, I want the gold medal now. I was a sprinter. So, I'm very competitive, athletic. Like, I just want to get to the end.
And patience, although it can be difficult and not something that may naturally occur, is your friend in this. And we see so many people who are younger that are diagnosed with PTSD and many of the kinds of things that you've gone through at these very early ages too. So let's shift things a little bit, the contour of the conversation, and go into your upcoming book, Imagine the Possibilities. I love that title. How is this one different? Tell us about this one.
Oh, wow. The way it started is nothing like I would have ever expected. Almost a year ago, during the busiest time for our gift shop, I got an email and my Molly at buddhadoodles.com, and y'all are always welcome to drop me a line there. I was busy, I wasn't checking my emails, and I missed a very important email. And thankfully my friend Liza, who is still helping me out with Buddha Doodles stuff, caught it. And it was an email from Andrews McMill Universal, from an editor there who had been subscribed to the free daily doodle for a bit and loved them and casually offered me a book deal.
Casually.
And I was like, the people that published Dilbert, Calvin and Hobbes, and The Far Side, there basically was just 2 sentences like, would you be interested in doing a book with us? Like, my jaw dropped. First of all, I couldn't believe I almost missed it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd go for a walk. I went for a walk just to celebrate, really. I was just awestruck. Calvin and Hobbes and Far Side were some of my biggest inspirations growing up. And so I knew, just like with everything with Buddha Doodles, I've had this loving detachment, like whatever happens, happens. Like this is kind of this big fun experiment. And so I was like, well, if I do sign a deal or I don't, it's just really awesome that they emailed me. And I just thanked the universe on this walk. And after a few months of discussions, we signed a deal, and I worked on a book for 2 or 3 months. And it is a compilation of the best of Buddha Doodles, plus I think about 30 new pieces that I created that are nowhere else. They're not on social media or on the email list. But the best of includes mostly fan favorites. So we went through hundreds of comics and curated a selection based on our fans and what they loved. And this book it's a little gift book, 6x6. It's hardcover, but it's like a hard, squishy cover, so you can like go to sleep with it at night. It can be like a pillow. And it's going to be distributed worldwide. And I had so much fun creating this book, and also was really in a kind of a difficult spot while I was creating it, because I was kind of going through some personal things in my life, my love life, that were not so fun. And so I used that energy to really focus on Buddha Doodles. And I really needed the doodles more than ever at this time. I was going through a breakup, and so they served the purpose that they always have, and that is they're like these little medicine shots. And so there's a resonance to the book that feels really bright and special because of that difficult time that I was producing the work.
Yeah, I was thinking, you mentioned the time frame of that. I'm like, the environment of that time in your life was not the happiest.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in that year. Like, I was like, all of this is happening at once, and I'm happy to fill you in on that.
Great. And for folks who are listening, again, we'll be linking to that new book, and the video is also embedded on the episode page for this. I also wanted to ask, Molly, are you working on other projects? What else is going on? What are you thinking about doing too?
Well, I've started on a graphic novel that features the monk and the elephant character, Udi and Zed. And it also features as the protagonist this little girl who has anxiety. And the book is meant to educate about mindfulness. And the story, I have the general architecture of the story, and the first 30 pages down is meant to educate and inspire and to help people, little girls especially, or little boys, deal with anxiety or, bullying at school or any sort of adversities that young adults might be facing. And then I'm also working on more animations, which I'm really excited about, with my friend Nick Shada, who's an amazing animator, and we want to do a mini series. And so we're doing these 15-second animations every Saturday morning, and we're going to start a Patreon campaign and crowdfund support so that I can pay my animator well. And there's more in the mix, I'm sure, that will come to me. There's so much energy right now, and Buddha Doodles is its own life force, and I'm really just here to shepherd things and be the vessel and curate and continue, most importantly, to keep doodling every morning. That's the main thing.
Wonderful. For folks who are listening, you can check into more of this at the main website, buddhadoodles.com. But you can also do the pre-orders on buddhadoodlesbook.com. Molly, is there anything else you want to share about that, just the websites and addresses?
Oh, yeah. buddhadoodlesbook.com is where you can directly pre-order. And if you want to subscribe to the free daily comic, you can go to buddhadoodles.com, and I will be in your email box every morning with a fresh doodle Monday through Friday. And then we, share old ones on the weekends. And I really just want to thank everyone who's listening and, for everyone's support, and feel free to drop me a line, Molly at buddhadoodles.com, if you got any questions or just want to share something with me.
Great. Molly Hahn, thanks so much for being here, and we're not going to wait 3 more years to have you back.
No, let's do it in a couple weeks. I'm just kidding. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ted.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.